Welcome back to the channel, guys. In this video, we are discussing the potential of Erika Kirk and her family having CIA connections. Now, in my last video, we went in depth into the history of Erika Kirk's family. This is very clearly not any normal, everyday U.S. military family, and make sure to watch the previous video to go deeper into that. And this video isn't solely about Erika Kirk and how she might potentially be a CIA asset or how her parents might have been CIA assets. I want to look at it from a different angle. Also to prevent another subpoena, because I got a subpoena from Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds when I started talking about their connections that seemed to hit a little bit too close to home. This video is going to be based more on the CIA's long history of infiltrating movements, potentially Turning Point USA, infiltrating religious organizations, especially evangelist organizations and NGOs with connections to Romania. Yeah. Romanian angels ring a bell for anyone. Clergy, Harvard, intellectual institutions, some of the biggest in the world, musicians, actors, media, the movies you see, how the CIA has quite literally infiltrated everything with propaganda to help you decide what you believe, but to make it in a way where you don't realize that the CIA has made you believe those things. Interestingly enough, and what we're going to talk about later on in this episode is, has Operation Mockingbird evolved into what we're seeing with Israel today? Because what we're seeing with Israel today is paying influencers $7,000 per post to push propaganda. Don't worry, we'll hear from Netanyahu himself in regards to that later on in the episode. But what I'm going to propose is, one, I believe that there's a potential that Erika Kirk has ties to the CIA and that her family has ties to the CIA, that there is a potential that they may have been assets and that she was placed intentionally to meet Charlie Kirk. And number two, I am going to propose that what we're seeing with Israel and this paying off influencers, paying them $7,000 to push propaganda for Israel and silence Palestine voices, is at its core the evolution of Operation Mockingbird. So welcome back to the channel. Let's get into it. Now, for those that are new to the channel, I have over 15 years of experience in branding, marketing, and PR, and I actually currently work within those industries as well, which is why this channel doesn't have more content than it does, because that is my primary job at this point until the channel can carry itself. And what got me interested in exposing media manipulation and narrative control was, well, being in the industry and seeing firsthand how much manipulation happens, how much psychological warfare happens without you realizing it, and how it infiltrates absolutely everything without, like I said, you realizing it. And so I wanted this channel to be a way where I could take my education and the way my eyes train to see things to help expose the spin, the media manipulation and narrative control that really, at the end of the day, controls our entire life. Now, I'm Canadian. However, I've always had an obsession with the CIA and FBI for some reason. I remember when I was a kid, I did grow up in a police family, and so I had an obsession with the law and, for some odd reason, serial killers. Other young girls were playing with My Little Ponies, and sure, I had My Little Ponies, but mostly I was like researching Jack the Ripper. That was me as a child. And my dreams were crushed when I heard that I couldn't work for the FBI because I'm Canadian. I wanted to be an asset. I wanted to be a spy. And then I also realized that, sure, we have sort of the equivalent in Canada as CSIS, but it's not as badass. And so I ended up moving on from that dream, and I saw different ways of bringing it out in terms of eventually getting into, after a career in psychology, in branding, marketing, and PR, because it was the psychology of it that really interested me. And now I bring it all to you on the channel, and we look at what's going on in the news. Now, one thing I'm going to say is the market's always shifting. People are always, as technology increases, for example, AI, people are becoming more aware. And what used to work doesn't work anymore. This is something I even say with my business and branding clients, is what used to work isn't going to work a year from now or 2 years from now. And I believe what we're witnessing right now and what we are really in the middle of is an evolution of the propaganda machine, the evolution of what has been called Operation Mockingbird. Now, even though we have declassified documents in regards to Project Mockingbird, which was tapping journalists' phones, there's nothing declassified in regards to Operation Mockingbird. It's also often called a conspiracy theory, even though it's not. So I would like to propose that what we're seeing is what used to work back then doesn't work anymore, much to the dismay of those in power. Thanks, YouTube, because now people like us can research, learn, and see what's going on. However, in Netanyahu's own words, he said the battlefield has moved from the ground to X and TikTok. And I believe him. So I believe that Operation Mockingbird has moved to social media. We've moved where and how propaganda has to be done and how the CIA infiltrates things. And I do believe, because one of the pieces I get pushback around is actually Charlie Kirk. Like, he's who potentially the CIA or Israel is going to assassinate. Come on. I mean, one, they've assassinated people for less. The CIA is known for assassinating people. And two, yeah, if what I'm proposing is right, then someone like Charlie, who has the youth vote, which I would imagine under 35 would be the demographic for TikTok. Well, if we're looking at what him and Megyn Kelly talked about just before his death, the support of Israel under 35 is basically zero. What happens if someone like Charlie Kirk comes out and starts actually speaking out against Israel? He doesn't preface everything like, look, I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But here are my thoughts. What if he actually comes out? What if he did bring Candace Owens on stage? Honestly, I'm not telling you what to think. I want you to sit with that and think critically, not what propaganda is telling you to think, not what someone else said you should think, not because I said it, not because Candace Owens said it, not because Ben Shapiro said it. I want you to genuinely sit with that question. If I'm right and Operation Mockingbird has evolved to be on social media, and Israel made a big oopsie by exposing that in Netanyahu's bold speech, what kind of threat would someone like Charlie Kirk have if he did have Candace Owens back on stage, if he did publicly separate from Jewish donors, if he did pivot in his message? Netanyahu himself said that the battlefield is now on X and TikTok. Charlie has control of the youth vote, which would be, especially under 35, I would imagine, would be Charlie's biggest support base, which would be X and TikTok. I imagine the loyal base that Charlie has would trust him over propaganda from Israel from nobody influencers. So no matter what, your propaganda war, your psychological warfare isn't going to be able to stand up against Charlie Kirk on X and TikTok. And what if they thought he was no longer someone they could control? What if they tried the last-ditch effort at that get-together and they realized they couldn't control him anymore? Look, I'm not saying Turning Point did something. But what if they reported back to someone and said, look, we tried. We gave it the old elbow grease and we can't control him. He's going to come out and invite Candace to Amfest. He's going to have Candace on stage and he's going to come out and start talking about how he doesn't support Israel anymore and he's distancing himself. If that phone call happened and the propaganda war has moved to the platforms that his base is on, who would benefit from him being taken out? Who would benefit from Charlie no longer being able to say how he's shifting, how he's changing, what he sees now? CIA has assassinated for less. Governments have gotten involved for less. And that's what I'm proposing today. So, either my channel's going to get taken down or I'm going to get taken out after today. We'll see which one happens. But thank you for being here. Make sure to like, subscribe, give us a share, say hi in the comments. It's so great to see so many people are starting to become aware of what's going on and start to think critically. That is what Charlie Kirk said right before his death when he had Ben Shapiro on his channel and interviewed him, where he said, things have happened that have made me think critically about the media. And so I appreciate you being here. I know it's not as fancy as some other things I could talk about, but it's something I'm really passionate about. But let's get into this today with the cultural Cold War from 1950s onwards. Now, if you can hang out with me for the more boring bits, I think you're going to end today and leave today mind blown. So just hang out with me. Just trust the process. Because there's going to be some more boring bits, but it all adds up to what I'm going to say at the end. So you got to stick with me through this. So one of my favorite quotes is, "The way to carry out good propaganda is never to appear to be carrying it out at all." And that's Richard Crossman. This is something I say to clients all the time. For example, in marketing, people love to buy, they hate to feel like they're being sold to. So you want to make it that your marketing feels as if they're not being sold to. Taylor Swift is great like that. Feels like an old friend is giving you a new variant because that's what you want and that's what it feels like. It feels like all along that you wanted it anyway. So she's not selling to you, she's just giving you what you want. That's the best kinds of sales and marketing. For PR people, people obviously hate being manipulated. Therefore, the best way to spin is to make it appear like you aren't spinning at all. It's through really good storytelling and connecting with people's emotions. And herein lies the problem with TPUSA and Erica Kirk. You can feel the spin. You can feel the media manipulation, the narrative control, and it's like seeping through their pores inauthenticity. And the world's sick of inauthenticity. Even when Andrew Colvett rebranded himself as the best friend of Charlie Kirk, people felt it. And it made people more suspicious of Turning Point USA. And it made people ultimately believe Candace Owens because they're going, well, something's fishy here. They're not telling the truth. She seems to be the only one asking questions. So I'm going to go with Candace on this. And Turning Point USA and Erika Kirk have no one to blame but themselves. This is also the biggest issue ultimately with Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds. You can feel the spin, you can feel the media manipulation, and people are having none of it. So when we go back to the CIA's cultural Cold War from the 1950s onwards, they funneled millions through fronts like the Congress for Cultural Freedom. Let's pull that up. I want to put the links for some of these documents in the show notes so you can read them yourself. I'm not going to read each one to you. It's reading time with Ashley. No, we're not going to do that today. I am going to read the first quote here, and it says, now this is titled Origins of the Congress for Cultural Freedom, 1949 to 1950. Give me $100 million and 1,000 dedicated people, and I will guarantee to generate such a wave of democratic unrest among the masses, yes, even among the soldiers of Stalin's own empire, that all of his problems for a long period of time to come will be internal. I can find the people. Sidney Hook, 1949. It says here, the Congress for Cultural Freedom is widely considered one of the CIA's more daring and effective Cold War covert operations. It published literary and political journals such as Encounter, hosted dozens of conferences, bringing together some of the most eminent Western thinkers, and even did what it could to help intellectuals behind the Iron Curtain. Somehow this organization of scholars and artists, egotistical, free-thinking, and even anti-American in their politics, managed to reach out from its Paris headquarters to demonstrate that communism, despite its blandishments, was a deadly foe of art and thought. Getting such people to cooperate at all was such a feat. But the Congress's administrative secretary, Michael Jonelson, kept them working together for almost 2 decades until the agency arranged an amicable separation from the Congress in 1966. The Congress for Cultural Freedom, despite the embarrassing exposure of its CIA sponsorship, the CIA paid it, in 1967 ultimately helped to negate communism's appeal to artists and intellectuals, undermining at the same time the communist pose of moral superiority. And while CIA sponsorship of the Congress has long been publicly known, the origins of that relationship have remained obscure, even to agency veterans who worked on the project. Now, this is something I want to bring up in regards to could, potentially, I'm not saying it happened. I am saying it is possible because there is a long history of this shit. We have the CIA funding the Congress for Cultural Freedom and their messaging for propaganda. Is it possible that large organizations such as the CIA or government agencies had got their claws in Turning Point USA to push a certain agenda? Now, I'm not saying this Tyler Robinson guy is not involved at all, but I am saying that the story we've gotten is not adding up. It doesn't pass the smell test. So this push with the CCF, The reason why it works so well is I want you to just, again, bring yourself back one step to think, well, how would something land with you if you saw the CIA put out a message? There's like an infomercial about how a certain country's bad or a certain type of government is bad, right? How would that land if the government's putting that out versus your favorite celebrity or your favorite musician from the stage telling you about something? That public figure that you built connection with, trust with, and you believe is authentic. Arts organizations, clergy, big institutions like Harvard, who has been connected with the CIA for a long time. How does it land differently if your favorite public figures and institutions are pushing something versus the government coming out and saying it? I can nearly guarantee that it's going to land differently, especially to your subconscious mind. If it's someone you trust, you already have no like and trust factor with, and you feel like they wouldn't lie to you, they're being authentic, you're likely not going to question it as much. The CIA has infiltrated everywhere. The CCF shows how this created propaganda that boosted allies of the US while sidelining or smearing non-allies, emphasizing that nothing is unbiased. And the CIA infiltrated everywhere, from abstract art to religious groups. And this is why it's so important, why I wanted to start with the Congress for Cultural Freedom, because it's an organization that ultimately was taking CIA money and was funded by CIA money to push propaganda for the CIA. So again, at the end of the day, if I'm sitting here thinking about the possibilities of who could be behind the assassination of Charlie Kirk, no, it doesn't come off as conspiracy or out of the realm of possibility that the CIA is somehow involved. To me, it's also not outside the realm of possibility that Erika Kirk was an asset. Now, something that might be relevant to Erika Kirk. This organization funded clergy-linked organizations for moral cover, Hollywood-adjacent cultural events, because again, if you get your favorite Hollywood celebrity to say something, you're going to trust it more than the CIA, and even Romanian NGOs. So Romanian charities were funded by this organization. Well, we know Erica ran Romanian Angels that apparently helped with adoption of children and youth. Watch my last video for more on that. Because while it said that it was there for fostering and adoptions, it had direct ties to the US military. There's no evidence that these people were actually adopted out into good homes. There's no evidence that this organization did what it said it was supposed to do. In fact, there's alleged connections to Epstein. And not only that, but connected to a brothel linked to the US military base just down the street from Romanian Angels that had underage girls. So is it a stretch that these evangelist groups were often linked to the CIA as fronts, that this organization, Romanian Angels, that never has any proof it did what it did and closed down mysteriously one day with no reason? There's no documented reason, no statement that it could be connected, that there could be CIA connections. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. And in fact, I would say it makes more sense when you start to look at the military and potential alleged, the military is known, it's not alleged, but the potential CIA connections, why no one ever looked into it. There was never an investigation into the US military for that underage brothel, no investigation into Romanian Angels, despite the locals constantly complaining about it being a front for trafficking. There's no investigation. Nothing ever happened. It's absolutely egregious. In fact, in one of my favorite books, I've read it multiple times. I have actually multiple copies. I don't know. Maybe there's a worry I won't be able to buy it one day and that I'll lose one. I need a backup. But Who Paid the Piper? Great book. It's one of the books that sits right behind me at my desk. Saunders revealed that the CIA funded these evangelist Christian NGOs as a front to spread anti-communist ideology. Actually, before we go any further, I want to read this part. It's just at the beginning. I have it marked from Who Paid the Piper, because she says clearly by camouflaging its investment, the CIA acted on the supposition that its blandishments would be refused if offered openly. So the CIA never actually put out to the public where its investments were going, what it was investing in. It says, what kind of freedom can be advanced by such deception? Freedom of any kind certainly wasn't on the agenda in the Soviet Union, where those writers and intellectuals who were not sent to the gallows were lassoed into serving the interests of the state. It was, of course, right to oppose such unfreedom, but with what means? Was there any real justification for assuming that the principles of Western democracy couldn't be revived in post-war Europe, according to some internal mechanism? Or for not assuming that democracy could be more complex than we implied by the lauding of American liberalism? To what degree was it admissible for another state to covertly intervene in the fundamental process of organic intellectual growth, of free debate, and the uninhibited flow of ideas? Did this not risk producing, instead of freedom, a kind of unfreedom, where people think they are acting freely, when in fact they are bound to forces of which they have no control? The CIA's engagement in cultural warfare raises other troubling questions. Did financial aid distort the process by which intellectuals and their ideas were advanced? Were people selected for their positions rather than on the basis of intellectual merit? So it goes on, and there's a couple pieces here that I find particularly interesting in regards to Erika Kirk and Charlie Kirk. Is number one, it says here, to what degree was it admissible for another state to covertly intervene in the fundamental process of organic intellectual growth, of free debate, and the uninhibited flow of ideas? So what we're seeing here, going back to the Cold War, the CIA did not like free thinking. It did not like, essentially, the Charlie Kirk approach. And the Charlie Kirk approach is asking questions. It didn't want that. So it used this propaganda to prevent the free flow of ideas, to prevent intellectual growth, and to prevent free debate. It wanted to control the narrative. And the other thing that really got me thinking is, did financial aid distort the process by which intellectuals and their ideas were advanced? We already know that Charlie Kirk had turned down $150 million from Israel. Where was that money connected to? Was it strictly Israel? Or was he, in fact, potentially turning down CIA money and Israel money? It's just questions. We'll probably never have an answer for that, but it's just very interesting. Did financial aid distort the process by which intellectuals and their ideas were advanced? I don't believe Charlie Kirk was able to be bought. And if he was not able to be bought, and we have a history of the CIA and governments intervening when people are not able to be bought, is it therefore a stretch that the CIA is behind what happened? All right, that's all I've got for you for Storytime with Ashley, but it's a fantastic book. And it's just, interestingly, I have a lot of books like this. I had just thought I need to pick it up again. And I just thought to pick it up again while I was diving back into the Charlie Kirk, Erika Kirk, Turning Point USA situation. And I saw that as a sign. And that was the page I turned to first. And it just fits. It fits the cultural infiltration. It fits the CIA history. It fits going right back to the Cold War. And I don't believe any of these, that we're going to talk about Operation Mockingbird next, I don't believe any of these are done. This term that you likely have heard before is about a large-scale, long-run CIA program starting in the late 1940s, early 1950s, again, early Cold War. And it was meant to manipulate and influence domestic and foreign news media for propaganda purposes. It involved recruiting journalists as assets, planting stories, funding front groups, and shaping public opinion to counter Soviet communist influence. And I don't believe they stopped there. I don't believe that was the only agenda that Operation Mockingbird had, or that it's ever had. The name Operation Mockingbird first appeared in Deborah Davis's 1979 unauthorized biography, Catherine the Great, about Washington Post owner Katharine Graham, where she claimed it was run by figures like Frank Wisner and Cord Meyer. Now, the Church Committee confirmed the CIA had relationships with about 50 journalists, mostly foreign, and broader media ties, but they did not identify any formal program called Operation Mockingbird. They're like, okay, sure, we've got a couple that we work with, but it's not like an operation. And they left it at that. There was no declassified CIA documents that use Operation Mockingbird for this media influence effort. Now, again, what was this all about? Well, it was about planting stories to boost the US and their allies while undermining the enemies and critics. Again, I think this is literally something that still goes on. But let's look at a whistleblower leak. So this is from an official government website. This isn't something that I found on like Reddit. It's Foreign and Military Intelligence, Book 1, Final Report of the Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with respect to intelligence activities. I will, again, link this in the show notes for you if you're desiring to read the full report in regards to this. What it did was expose ties to over 400 journalists. Remember, the CIA was like, sure, there's like 50 we work with. And one of my favorite quotes within this is the CIA owns everyone of significance. So again, what happens if the CIA owns everyone of significance and the most significant person to continue the Israel propaganda machine in the US starts to go against that narrative? Can't be bought, can't be owned. I don't think it's a stretch. Now, the committee in this report described this relationship between the CIA and these journalists, including paid relationships, so salaried operatives, contractors, or regular payments and gifts, unpaid or occasional contract, so that would be reimbursements or access to information. And the report notes that the CIA used these for intelligence collection, propaganda placement, and sometimes cover abroad, with inevitable fallout into domestic US media. Now, in this report, they talk about here, the inquiry arises out of allegations of abuse and improper activities by the intelligence agencies of the United States. One of my favorite quotes from this, and I'll read it to you, is, in examining the CIA's past and present use of the US media, the committee finds two reasons for concern. The first is the potential inherent to covert media operations for manipulating or incidentally misleading the American public. The second is the damage to the credibility and independence of a free press, which may be caused by covert relationships with the US journalists and media organizations. That's one of my favorite quotes from this. And I personally believe that Charlie is one of the biggest dangers to controlled narratives because his whole platform was asking questions. And I believe that as Charlie Kirk would have asked more questions, maybe things didn't sit right with him, that he would have gone more public with it. You can see it since 2023 that he's becoming more and more public with his concerns around Israel. He was very passionate about it about a month before his death on the Megyn Kelly show. And so what happens when you have an organization like the CIA who does not want free press, does not want independent thinkers, wants to be able to control the voices that are taking a lead within media and can't do that to someone? And the broader context on media use that this report shows us is that the committee noted CIA subsidies to foreign publications, books, over 1,000 produced and sponsored by 1967, and press services, which many find their way into the US markets, repackaged as articles or reviews even. It criticized how it's blurred the lines between foreign intelligence and domestic influence. And so it's a fantastic 642 pages, but it's a fantastic look into the damage the CIA is doing in regards to the media and the public. But they don't care. We've never had the CIA come out and say, oh, sorry, we'll stop doing this. The best we got was, it's not great, but there's loopholes. So we're in a loophole. This is your CIA. Now wait till you see Carl Bernstein's Rolling Stone article. We're going to pull that up next. All right, this gem is another one of my favorites. Carl Bernstein, after leaving the Washington Post in 1977, Carl Bernstein spent 6 months looking at the relationship of the CIA and the press during the Cold War years. He has a 25,000-word cover story on this, published in Rolling Stones on October 20th, 1977. This is another link I will provide you in the show notes. Now, before we get into this too far, I just want to remind you to like, share, subscribe. These videos tend to get very little traction, so I really rely on this incredible community to share the word, to share the link, and help boost the videos here. And check out the merch store on your way out the door. We have some incredible fun stuff over there. Grab something for yourself. It really helps the channel and I'd really appreciate it. It allows me to do what I do because I mean, I run a farm animal sanctuary and have a lot of animals on the property that we care for. Everything I make on YouTube goes towards helping our farm animal sanctuary animals. I show behind the scenes over on Instagram of them. Every little bit truly helps when you're in the realm of animal rescue work. Okay, let's dive into this article. This article is a cornerstone for discussions of CIA media infiltration. So it's linked to the Operation Mockingbird conversation. And it shows how the agency used journalists for intelligence gathering, propaganda placement, cover for operations, and message relay, often with management consent from major outlets. It emphasized that these ties created systemic bias benefiting pro-US narratives while eroding press independence. Again, I'm going to say it again. Is it a far stretch to think that an organization that has this kind of control of the media is just going to let someone like Charlie go rogue? And I'm not saying Charlie was aware there was any CIA control. I think the CIA connections come from Erica's side, to be quite honest. I've been honest about that. It's my opinion. I'm not saying it's true. I'm saying it's my opinion. If the shoe fits, I don't believe Charlie would have known, because I don't believe he ever would have been able to get paid off. I believe that he became aware that he was becoming more of a threat to people and governments. I believe he was becoming aware that his lack of ability to be controlled was being a threat. He talked about that, and we played it on the Megyn Kelly show yesterday. Was it yesterday or the day before, one of my last videos, how he said, you tell me not to do something, I'm going to go harder in that direction. So is it possible that organizations such as this, and maybe he didn't realize CIA was behind it, but people in his life were pushing and saying, hey man, like, Candace Owens is a hard no. You can't have Candace on stage. What are you talking about dropping Jewish donors? Were there people around him that were assets potentially for the CIA, that were trying to control him for the CIA or for Israel or for some bigger organization, governmental tie? And they did that one last ditch effort, and they went back to someone and they said, man, I don't know. I can't control him. He's going to do what he's going to do. He wants to have fucking Candace Owens on stage. He's saying he's rejecting all the Jewish donors. And was a decision made there? I don't think it's outside of the realm of possibility. What we see over and over again in this video is that the CIA has control. Now, one of the quotes from here is, and this is a CIA official on subtle influence within media, in return for our giving them information, we'd ask them to do things that fit their roles as journalists, but that they wouldn't have thought of unless we put it in their minds. So it's subtle, psychological warfare at the end of the day. This article is fantastic. It again talks about the CIA and the media, how America's most powerful news media worked hand in glove with the Central Intelligence Agency, and why the Church Committee covered it up. And if you search on this article words such as the New York Times comes up. Time Magazine comes up. Interestingly enough, for those that are following the Justin Baldoni Blake Lively trial, New York Times is the one that published the Inside a Hollywood Smear Campaign article, and Time Magazine is the one that awarded Blake Lively and Ryan Reynolds for bullshit awards. So, I don't believe any of these organizations ever were unbiased, and this just shows it even more. So New York Times comes up 38 times in this article. We see it over and over and over again. Look at this. Among the executives who lent their cooperation to the agency were William Paley of the Columbia Broadcasting System, Henry Luce of Time Inc., Arthur Hayes Salzberg of the New York Times, Barry Bingham Sr. of the Louisville Courier-Journal, and James Copley of the Copley News Service. Other organizations which cooperate with the CIA include the American Broadcasting Company, the National Broadcasting Company, the Associated Press, United Press International, Reuters, Hearst Newspapers, Scripps Howard, Newsweek Magazine, the Mutual Broadcasting System, the Miami Herald, and the Old Saturday Evening Post, and the New York Herald Tribune. By far the most valuable of these associations, according to the CIA officials, have been the New York Times, CBS, and Time Inc. The CIA's use of the American news media has been much more extensive than the agency officials have acknowledged publicly or in closed sessions with members of Congress. The general outlines of what happened are indisputable. The specifics are harder to come by. CIA sources hint that a particular journalist was trafficking all over Eastern Europe for the agency. The journalist says, no, he just had lunch with the station chief. CIA sources say flatly that a well-known ABC correspondent worked for the agency through 1973. A high-level CIA official with a prodigious memory says that the New York Times provided cover for about 10 CIA operatives between 1950 and 1966. He does not know who they were or who in the newspaper's management made the arrangements. This has infiltrated everything. So this report is a stark contrast to what we're going to see the CIA admitting to, which was like, yeah, sure, more or less approximately 50 journalists. Sure, we have connections too. No, what we see here is over 400 American journalists secretly carried out assignments for the CIA over 25 years. This included reporters, editors, freelancers, executives. By 1976, the CIA still had active ties with 75 to 90 journalists. Relationships range from tacit cooperation, so informal favors, to explicit secrecy agreements, payments, and contracts. At least 200 to 250 journalists signed secrecy pledges and had formal agreements. The focus was abroad, Western Europe, Latin America, and the Far East, where journalists acted as eyes and ears, spotted recruited agents, planted misinformation, hosted spies, and provided briefings and debriefings post-trip. And again, what I propose, we will be using Netanyahu's own words against him. In a changing landscape, when people are trusting New York Times less and less, CBS less and less, when they're really becoming jokes, who do you go to? You go to influencers. It doesn't take a whole hell of a lot of critical thinking skills to see that what they've done is shift their approach, and they're going to social media sites. They are going to influencers, people that you wouldn't think of being involved, that you've grown a relationship with that person and you trust them, you trust their views. It shifted. I am telling you, I will die on this hill. It has shifted. It is not gone. They never even admitted to this shit. The CIA did admit that there's loopholes in how to work with the media and access journalists. They said it themselves, but it has just shifted. The relationships are different. The relationships, I believe now, are in regards to influencers. And I don't know why Netanyahu ever said those words out loud or admitted to that, to be quite honest. But we're not done. Let's go right over into another government report, the CIA's use of journalists and clergy in intelligence operations. This is again from U.S. government websites. We even have the stamp here. It is the Select Committee on Intelligence of the United States Senate. And this happened on July 17th, 1996. So really not that long ago. This is another massive document, it's 50 pages. We're not going to go through word for word. I will drop the link in the show notes. But essentially what we're looking at again is the CIA using clergy, NGOs, so charities for cover, journalists for cover, and journalists to plant stories and spread propaganda. CIA has a long history of controlling the narrative and pushing propaganda through media. Actually, speaking of media, let's get into movies. We're going to watch the trailer for Theaters of War, How the Pentagon and CIA Took Hollywood. I've played this trailer previously on the channel. It's something that can be really shocking for people to realize how even Hollywood is controlled by the CIA. I will have to pause this probably halfway through just for fair use and to provide commentary on it. But let's dive into Theaters of War, How the Pentagon and CIA Took Hollywood.
So say you're a producer and you want to make a war film.
To try and find out whether the Pentagon might be interested, you would walk into the entertainment liaison office in downtown Los Angeles.
You say, I want to film an Air Force base, or I want an aircraft carrier, or I want some Black Hawk helicopters, or whatever it is.
And they would tell you straight away, give us your entire script.
We've worked with Mr. Bay here since Armageddon, if I'm not mistaken, and hope to do more of the same. I've got a direct line to the Pentagon.
Some people probably would say, well, yeah.
And who also has connection to defense and defense connections, military connections? Erica Kirk. Her family worked within this as well.
Heard of this, like, Top Gun, maybe Black Hawk Down, maybe some of the Marvel series.
But what they don't know is how systematic this has been and how huge this operation has been.
You can call it censorship, you can call it propaganda. It's all of these things.
Now these freedom of information requests that have been successful allow us to actually look at that list, and it's stunning.
What we've found is that thousands upon thousands upon thousands of products have been affected and are often rewritten at script level by the national security state in the United States. Do normal people know about that? No, of course they don't.
Let's back up. I just want to show you that screenshot right here. So this is a script: no shooting down plane, killing crew unless in self-defense. They've cut out this script, and the CIA has said, look, you want our planes? You want access to what we have? Well, I need to see the entire script, and what I'm going to do is rewrite it. So no shooting down plane, killing crew unless in self-defense. So they've been scripting Hollywood in regards to how you see the US and how you see their allies and their rivals without you even knowing it. But let's continue.
Level by the national security state in the United States. Do normal people know about that? No, of course they don't.
So Theaters of War, really honest look on what goes on within Hollywood and media. The reality is the CIA has infiltrated everything. It shapes everything that you see. The whistleblowers are showing 1,800 plus collaborations. Vault 7 on surveillance. We're seeing that they change the actual scripts, that they glamorize espionage and things that the US do, and then demonize things that go against the US. That it's all scripted to get approval, to be using the CIA equipment, to get approval, to be using certain aspects of the CIA. You have to fit their narrative. Now, Saunders, in the book I was talking about earlier, details CIA funding Hollywood-tied cultural events as well. So film festivals were funded by the CIA through the CCF that we talked about earlier. Let me say that again. Hollywood events, including festivals, were being funded, potentially and probably still are, by the CIA through the CCF. It's my belief this happens for the same reason I believe that it is completely within the realm of possibility that the CIA took out Charlie Kirk. I believe all of this happens because you are going to trust Charlie Kirk over some random ass influencer that Israel's paying. You're going to trust your favorite musician or actress that comes out pushing a certain agenda over the CIA putting out a PSA. This is psychological warfare, creating subconscious bias, favoring the US and allies, and again, demonizing anyone that they want you to see in a certain light. So again, what happens if the number one ally of the US, Israel, is being called out by one of the number one conservative influencers in the world, Charlie Kirk? Again, I don't think it is outside of the realm of possibility that we are seeing this big FBI cover-up with Tyler Robinson, that it is not how it went down. I found a quote that said, Israel's security has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy since the establishment of the modern Jewish state in 1948. This is Julie Raymond, AJC's Senior Vice President of Policy and Political Affairs. The U.S.-Israel special relationship is based not just in shared values, but in vital partnership in combating threats to democracy and security both regionally and globally. And this was a statement that was just said in 2025. So we're having people come out and say, no, the Israel-U.S. relationship is vital. It is a vital partnership in combating threats. It is a vital partnership for security. Again, what happens if Charlie Kirk starts to question the wrong things? If he asks the wrong questions, if he cannot be controlled, and then a month before his death goes on Megyn Kelly's show and says, hey, I honestly think it was the middle finger to everyone that was at that intervention. I believe Candace Owens when she said there was an intervention. I do not believe Turning Point. I do not believe any of these liars that are coming out saying this didn't happen. Bullshit. I think it was a last-ditch effort. And then Charlie Kirk gave you all the middle finger. Your handlers, whoever your handlers are, gave you the middle finger on Megyn Kelly when he said, I can't be controlled. And if you try to tell me to shut up, I will go harder in the opposite direction. Well, interesting that he couldn't go harder in the opposite direction because he was assassinated. Interesting timing that right when he wants to bring Candace Owens back on stage, right when Israel's starting this propaganda on TikTok and X, Charlie's taken out. I mean, I do believe coincidence can happen. But when there's too much shit piling up, it doesn't make sense. Especially when we look at the U.S. support of $3.3 billion to Israel. You think the U.S. is invested in Israel being an ally? Look at what happens with the CIA when they see you as an ally. They've got your back. And the CIA has a long history of assassinations. And we have Netanyahu coming out and being like, yeah, we have this massive campaign for influencers. Let's pull that up next.
Christian influencers, okay. You said, we talked about the woke right, and you said, I call it the woke Reich. That's a brilliant observation. The woke Reich, because these people, you know, they're not any different from the woke left. I mean, they're insane. They're loonies. But they're actually meeting on some of the things. And what we have to do is we have to secure that part of the base of our support in the United States. That is being challenged systematically. A lot of this is done with money. Money of NGOs, vast. Money of governments, vaster. Okay? We have to fight back. How do we fight back? Our influences. I think you should also talk to them if you have a chance. To that community, they're very important. And secondly, we're going to have to use the tools of battle. You know, the weapons change over time. You can't fight today with swords. That doesn't work very well. Okay, and you can't fight with cavalry. That doesn't work very well. And you have these new things, you know, like drones, things like that. I won't get into that. But we have to fight with the weapons that apply to the battlefields in which we're engaged. And the most important ones are the social media. And the most important purchase that is going on right now is TikTok. TikTok, number one. And I hope it goes through because it can be consequential. And the other one, what's the other one that's most important? X. That's it.
And just as an aside, I had done a video in the past. The individuals involved with purchasing purchasing TikTok have huge Israel ties.
That's cool. Very good. And, you know, so we have to talk to Elon. He's not an enemy. He's a friend. We should talk to him. Now, if we can get those two things, we get a lot. And I could go on other things, but that's not the point right now. We have to fight the fight, okay? To give direction to the Jewish people and give direction to our non-Jewish friends or those who could be our Jewish our friends. Are we going to succeed with everyone? No. Will there be a strong counterpoint? Yes.
So what happens when you're taking the fight, the battle, to the platforms that are Charlie's base, where he has the biggest influence? You can't tell me that at the very least this isn't suspicious. You can't tell me there's no basis for these organizations or governments to have a reason to take out Charlie Kirk. But let's pull up something else. When we pull up this report here, who are the influencers Israel is paying $7,000 per post? We actually don't know, it says, and that's likely illegal. So it talks about how Israel's paying a cohort of 14 to 18 social media influencers around $7,000 per post to promote the country's image in the American public. Well, this sounds a lot like everything we just spoke about in regards to the CIA. The campaign, nicknamed Esther Project, is coordinated by a newly created firm working out of Capitol Hill row house called Bridges Partners and is slated to run through November. However, as a publication, it is unclear who the influencers themselves are. According to the contract, they were supposed to begin posting on behalf of Israel in July, yet have not registered as foreign agents. They are supposed to register as foreign agents. But not registering as foreign agents and disclosing their names, the influencers are likely in violation of the U.S.'s premier foreign lobbying law, the Foreign Agents Registration Act. FARA experts say they must also mark their content as social media so that viewers know it is content sponsored by Israel. This is not, as far as anyone is aware, been happening, but oh funny, they're not getting in trouble for it. Israel's not in trouble for it. It's still going down. So Ben Freeman, the director of the Democratizing Foreign Policy Program at the Quincy Institute, said that the law in this case is straightforward. If you're being paid by a foreign government to influence the American public on that government's behalf, you should register under FARA. He added, if these influencers are knowingly accepting money from the Israeli government to produce content for the Israeli government that's being viewed by thousands or millions of their followers in the US, it's not at all clear why they would not be required to register under FARA. So I'm asking you, after today's video, could you come up with any reason why they're not being required to register under FARA? Because there is no proof they have. So it says here, anyone that is distributing material, propaganda, and other informational materials aimed at the United States audience on behalf of a foreign government agency would need to be disclosed somewhere, including potentially by filing a short form registration. But they haven't. Now, that Esther Project name, right? Out of Capitol Hill. Well, does that ring a bell for anyone? It should. I will pull it up. Well, look at that. In the US, there is Project Esther, a dangerous blueprint for censoring Palestine. Now, what's interesting, if you pull up Project Esther, the United States version of Project Esther, it is a project of the Heritage Foundation, a conservative think tank based in Washington, D.C., that aims to suppress pro-Palestine protests and what is classified as anti-Semitism. The effort was receiving support from several evangelist Christian organizations. So this is a project that's in the US that's meant to dismantle the pro-Palestine movement in the US by defining its associated groups and activities as part of a Hamas support network. So anyone that supports Palestine is labeled part of the Hamas support network. Interesting. Who said right before his death that if you even question Israel, you were labeled pro-Hamas? You guessed it. That would be Charlie Kirk. Let me just pull up more information on this for you. So this is just the overview on Google, but there's not actually a ton of information on this project, to be quite honest. Now, what's interesting is I can't find anything in regards to this being linked to Israel. In fact, AI will downright tell you, no, it is not linked. Anything I can find says, no, it's just the US that is here to really, work on anti-Semitism within the US. So it's saying any essentially criticism of Israel is anti-Semitism, which is a narrative 100% that is happening. But another thing that's interesting for me is that both of these organizations, we have Project Esther, which is the US one, and Esther Project, which is the Israeli one, are both run out of Washington, D.C. Interesting, right? And so it makes sense to me if there's some connection between the two, and Project Esther with the Heritage Foundation has been accused of having military and potentially CIA ties. And again, I don't know, that's just what I hear. If there's potential that the Project Esther in the US and Esther Project with Israel are connected, well, that would make sense then why the influencers don't have to give up their name, why they don't have to actually register as foreign agents. Well, do you actually have to register as a foreign agent if you're technically also working for the CIA? If that $7,000 isn't strictly Israeli money, do you have to register as a foreign agent? I would imagine you don't. Again, what do I know? But I would imagine you don't. So it's just another weird piece to me when I saw Esther Project on the Israeli side for this influencer campaign, the fact that the influencers don't have to let you know that they're a foreign agent, and that we have Project Esther in the US, both out of Washington, D.C., that is now labeling anyone that speaks out against Israel part of the Hamas support network. But let's hear what Charlie had to say in regards to this as well.
Let's just take a step back here. Like, I'm an American citizen. Yes, I want Israel to win. Yes, I'm a Christian. But like some of the mess, and you saw, and you've seen how I've been treated, Megan, by some, not all, by some.
No, it's very irritating.
It's
been so unfair. They were coming after you after Turning Point for, among other things, that you had Dave Smith there. Dave Smith is allowed to criticize Israel. You had both sides. The Israeli side was overrepresented.
Though. No, you're not allowed to. It's even worse than that. Again, I just want to repeat for the 5th time. I love Israel. I want Israel to win. But my moral character is now being put into question, Megan. Not my decisions. Not like, hey, are you doing this? Is it smart or is it dumb? But no, I am a bad person if I do this. And I could go, I mean, you saw it, Megan. It was trending on Twitter, thousands of tweets and text messages. And if I were to be charitable and generous, I will say the people that are attacking me are in a hyper paranoid state because they're at war, and war tends to make things black and white, and you're a hammer looking for a nail. So I'm trying to be charitable, Megan. Literally, I'm trying to cut as much slack as I can, right? They go, okay, what would it be like if all of a sudden I'm starting to see a pattern of behavior similar to what my grandparents saw in 1930s Germany online? How would I behave? So that's like my charitable kind of overcompensation spirit. At the same time, I'm like, but it's not defensible to be dumb, right?
Yeah.
So,
and it's offensive. It's offensive to those of us who have been out there defending them in many instances against critics on our own side. And now you have a couple of comments like, well, what about this? Well, has it gone on too long? Like, is it time to wrap it up? And the thing about Epstein is just so bizarre. I don't know who he was an agent for. It might have been Israel or an asset, or it might have been nobody, but we're allowed to speculate about that. It's there's some rule. You can't go there when it comes to Israel.
Well, you and I believe that we're Americans and Americans first, period. End of story. We are citizens of this nation, okay?
That's right.
Israel, we have funded, we have supported, and they're up against a sea of Islamic totalitarianism, and we should be cheering for them, right? Because they're up against barbarians and monsters, and we want them to win. However, here is Megyn Kelly and Charlie Kirk combined, probably 30 million social media followers, like pretty, right? And you and I have been holding this down, and you probably get the negative, oh, you're just shilling for Israel, whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do what's right regardless of the feedback, right? But then all of a sudden,
so he's going to do what's right regardless of the feedback. And we know that right before his death, days before his death, he said, I have no choice but to leave the pro-Israel cause, cut off the Jewish donors, and bring Candace Owens back on stage.
I host a person that I moderate the debate of, mind you, right? And I give equal time to Josh Hammer, equal time to a pro-Israel advocate, and my moral character is being put into question. And so I think it's a hyper paranoid, like we're just going to try to, we're going to just stamp out everything type of practice. But it goes to the point where if, for example, if I have less ability sometimes online to criticize the Israeli government without backlash than actual Israelis do. And that's really, really weird, isn't it, Megan? That's not right.
Wrong-headed. I'll tell you this for me. So I got some blowback after saying Mossad possibilities with Epstein, a comment behind which I stand. I mean, I realize, and I've of course reported what Alan Dershowitz has said as his lawyer. He says, I think he would have.
So we'll just pause there. So we also played a clip just the other day where he says, look, you try to control us and we're going to go harder in the other direction. He says he's a truth seeker. He's seeking the truth. And we know, which I've covered in the past as well, that people closest to him, even on X, were calling him out, calling him anti-Semitic. I have that in previous videos. And actually, I want to pull up something from X that I showed on previous videos, but I think are hyper relevant now that I'm thinking about this Project Esther project. Charlie Kirk starting to fall out of line with the narrative that was approved, and him talking about how he started to get called anti-Semitic and called names or pro-Hamas because of how he wasn't falling in line, just for asking questions. Now, to wrap up today, I'm going to leave you with a quote from the CIA themselves, how they describe what they do, this campaign of persuasion. They describe it as the planned use by a nation of propaganda and activities other than combat, which communicate ideas and information intended to influence the opinions, attitudes, emotions, and behavior of foreign groups in ways that will support the achievement of national aims. Further, they talk about CIA. The most effective kind of propaganda is defined as the kind where the subject moves in the direction you desire for reasons which he believes are his own. And it's completely useless to dispute this because these definitions are the core CIA principles, and it's littered all over government documents. So their goal is to get people to move in directions that they think are based on their own views and beliefs and their own volition, but it's not. It's because it was planted and manipulated based on the CIA. And I'm going to ask you a question before I let you go as well. Saunders said, did financial aid distort the process by which intellectuals and their ideas were advanced? The question I have for you is that what happened here? If Project Esther and Esther Project are in fact the same, and that's why these influencers do not have to report themselves as foreign agents, was that $150 million both US government and Israeli money? So was Charlie Kirk going up against the CIA as well as, and potentially the US government as well as the Israeli government? He could not be controlled when the CIA has a long history of just taking out people, burying them if they can't control them. And I want to end with how we began. The way to carry out good propaganda is never to appear to be carrying it out at all. Richard Crossman. Thank you for being here, my friends. Before you leave, on your way out, make sure to like, subscribe, hit get notifications, leave a comment. And with that, thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I will see you in the next one. Bye, guys. What I found, nobody wants to hear.